Everybody, thank you. Okay, well, welcome everybody to the Tuesday, February 6th regular meeting of the Council of the City of Nelson. And I just wanted to say it's sort of great to be back and to thank Jesse Woodward, Councilor Woodward, for his taking on the role of acting mayor in my absence over the last month. I really appreciate that, and it looked like everything worked the way it was supposed to, so thanks also to probably a little bit of assistance from staff, but thank you so much, Councilor Woodward.
You're welcome.
So I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Syilx, and the Sinixt people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. I would also like to acknowledge that February is Black History Month, and for those that are interested in pursuing more knowledge in this area, I do want to encourage you to go to the library. Our library always does a great job of these things, and they have displays currently both on Black authors and on anti-racism, and staff have also created reading lists for both the physical and digital collections that they have in the library. So that's a great place to go. It doesn't cost you anything, and is open to all of the public and residents of Nelson and Greater Nelson. Moving on to item 3, and are there any late items? I didn't see anybody send me a note or anything. So I'm assuming no late items. If I could have then an adoption of the agenda as circulated, moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor, opposed, and that carries. Adoption of, we don't have any previous minutes. I think we're up to date. Or do we have some here? Hang on.
There is a red binder here.
That'll be for the next
That's
meeting.
for
That's the next
in
one.
camera. So, okay.
Yep.
So on that note, I think we were pretty much up to date on previous minutes. We're moving into item number 6, so the council strategic plan presentation. And yes, and today we'll have Chris Johnson doing that presentation. And I think you've all had time to review the draft document. The idea here is that Mr. Johnson's gonna walk through it, and if there's any issues that we can have some discussion, ask questions, and hopefully we will be able to later in the meeting move receipt of this document and remove the draft watermark from it. There might be some small corrections, but the idea would be is whether or not we can move forward with it. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity to walk through the strategic plan a bit tonight. Just as a general sort of shape of it, I'm just going to kind of keep it clean as far as walking through it and allow for the conversations to happen from that point. So yeah, I'll get going on it, and I think we probably make it through the most part without questions. If there's anything that really jumps out, we can get into it, but it's a very short presentation, so leaving lots of time for discussion. Okay, so with the presentation, we wanted to first bring the draft strategic plan to council to provide an opportunity to first talk about the structure of the plan, discuss the components, how they support each other and provide staff and residents alike a line of sight from tactics straight through to the strategic goals. Sorry, I just gotta figure out this presenter mode. Next, we will talk through the process to develop the plan, talk a little bit about KPIs, and of course receive any feedback from council. So again, for the purpose of today, if you feel, or if you have any large concerns or feel like we're really missing the mark, we definitely want to hear that. Yeah, KPIs, they will come out, sorry, the abbreviations, key performance indicators. We'll have that whole slide on it there. So, but yeah, so for the purposes of today, if you have any large concerns or feel like we're really missing the mark on anything, please do let us know. it comes down to wordsmithing, things like that, probably better done through an email to myself or Kevin. Just if there's any great concerns on that front to keep us from getting too deep into it. Okay, so just, yeah, again, at the outset of this presentation, we thought it would be helpful for us all to have a common language. To Councillor Payne's point about abbreviations, similarly, when you start talking about things like goals, strategies, tactics, to really understand where those lie so that we don't get those mixed up. So yeah, the common language in this plan is really that strategic goals, expanded goals, provide a bit more color, strategies, and then tactics. The idea is that when read top to bottom or bottom to top, the plan is designed to show a clear line of sight from action to outcome. So whether it's outcome to action or action to outcome, it has that line of sight. You can see how one supports the next. So an example of line of sight would be, why would the city want to encourage the use of the arbor at Selkirk College? Well, the perspective is that people want to live where there is a vibrancy in sports, arts, culture, and recreation, as we stated in our expanded goal. And that by encouraging the use of the arbor by groups, there will be more cultural opportunities, which will in turn attract people to town. So the example being, in this way, council can support an economy that is thriving and inclusive by encouraging use of the arbor, where more events, cultural events will be planned that will attract people to town. And that way you're supporting the economy as opposed to sort of more directly supporting the economy by injecting money of some way, shape, or form.
So we're talking about the Indigenous gathering place at Selkirk, are we?
Correct, yes.
Thank
Yep. So again, just this is, as you saw in the plan as well, the idea being that having this legend included will really allow residents to have a clear understanding. And also when they stop to you and talk to you on the streets about how much they love that strategic goal or tactic, they be able to have that common language. So now that we've discussed a little bit about the structure, I'll talk, thought it would make sense to shed some light on the process from the workshop till now. So using strategic goal number 2 as an example, which I believe actually is on page number 8. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah, strategic. Strategic goal number 2 as our example. We left the session where we all worked together on this with what you see on the slide here. Oh yeah, it is page 8. There you go. And if you flip to page 8 in the plan, you'll see the changes. So really, from what you see on the slide, where we left, staff worked with each responsible department to confirm and further develop the strategies proposed. You can see how diverse and inclusive housing options was expanded to acknowledge that there is already some diverse and inclusive housing options in the community, as well as provide some temporal context, ensuring that we're not only meeting needs now, but into the future. So, sorry, you said a hand up? No. So yeah, just to highlight that we took, the work that was done as a group and just tried to provide some additional context and shape around that. We also work to add any high-level tactics to support these strategies. And so these are typically that were added were items that staff are currently working on or that council is being asked to support. A great example being the soccer dome, which recently came up that has arisen in between, or address new legislative requirements such as the new housing legislation that will be coming in. And you'll see, just for an understanding of the actual plan as it stands now, you'll see that some of the font is actually colored in the plan that you have. And that will not obviously go forward. That was just to highlight some of those new tactics that have been added since we were last working together on this.
So which is the black is the new thing?
No, the colored font would be the, so the black would be the old, or the original.
I didn't think we had the Housing Accelerator Fund when we were there, but maybe I'm mistaken.
Yeah, if it's in there, then if it didn't get added immediately at that, it would have been shortly thereafter.
Yeah. So we did send this out in draft before
Just with the high
the
level.
budget meetings, yeah. and
that information
we didn't have
wasn't
the individual
Yes. Got it.
tactics in that? Okay. So I think basically between sort of that draft and this draft is the newer things that came up in the came up during that period of time. So so that's, we hadn't really talked about these, but these were ones that obviously the province passed a whole bunch of legislation, and we have no, we have to adopt that. They have their legislative timelines around that. However, the lens that our planning staff will put on that is, here's what council's trying to achieve under that strategic goal. So how does, the policy room we have within that, we will look at this, what we're trying to achieve here, and say, how do we best meet that, council's strategic goal in implementing this provincial legislation. And I think you heard Sebastian talking about it a bit when he gave that update here. It's not, it's not black and white. There's some ability within there to meet our community goals within that. So that's what, this is telling us, this is what council wants us to consider in how we implement that.
Added some of the new tactics that were in there, and then finally, the sort of like last part of the process is to confirm the feasibility of the items that were identified with the different departments or responsible departments to ensure that they fit on the work plan. Any adjustments to the work plan were able to be made to incorporate them, and just make sure that we were generally appropriately resourced to deliver on something, so there weren't unrealistic expectations throughout.
I just want to, if you don't mind, just to answer Councillor Payne's question, because you talked about the different colors. The Housing Accelerator Fund for CMHC was actually announced in 2021. So it's something that was in the works. The money was in 2022. So it's money that the federal government had announced earlier in the year. Just in terms of, you asked about the timeline, like why wasn't that in blue? I guess it could have been in blue, but the CMHC Housing Accelerator Fund was part of the 2021 federal Liberals campaign. They got elected, and in 2022, they funded it.
And in 2023, we applied for it, and we heard that we've received it. Is that correct?
We have not heard.
We have not heard. That's what I was unclear about.
So
we applied for it in 2023.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's correct.
that's what I was familiar with.
Yeah.
So I didn't, not having been here, I wasn't familiar with the backstory, so thank you.
Yeah.
So on the whole then, just to sort of, really highlight that we took, what was, many hundreds of stickies and poster notes, converted into an electronic form, worked closely with all the departments to make sure that it would work, and really tried to build out some of the deliverables. Obviously, the time that we had as a group was fairly compressed, so you can't spend a whole bunch of time wordsmithing, but we were able to dig into that a little bit and try and, again, provide some of those contextual bounds, whether it be thinking about how much time it takes to do something, or the projecting into the future, or making sure that we aren't, in this case, acknowledging that there are some diverse and inclusive housing options. It's just something that needs to be further built upon. So the goals, strategies, and tactics were identified, but of course we know with any good plan, it really should be set up to be measured. For this plan, key performance indicators, KPIs, were developed where measuring them annually will illustrate whether or not progress is being made on the plan. It's worth noting, and I'm sure it's not news to anyone, but there's a really fine line that you have to walk in developing KPIs or key performance indicators or measures in general. You want a quality measure or KPI that is relatively easy to measure. You have to be, and that's the fine line to walk, because you can get really great KPIs or measures, but all of a sudden you have to hire 1.3 FTE to measure them. It's not really as valuable as you might think it is. So we did quite a lot of work with all the different departments to bang it around, but to kick it all off, I just wanted to say we used AI. So goals with their associated strategies and tactics, and this isn't just because of council, we were really interested to see what it could do for us here. So we entered in goals. We entered in the goals with their strategies and tactics. We loaded them into a bot, actually 2 different bots, and asked for an example, or as an example, the question that I put into one of them was, provide metrics within the powers of a municipality in BC for the goal, our economy is inclusive, diverse, and connected. And that produced a fairly long list of KPIs that we then kind of went through, reasoned through, like did the first sort of screening of to make sure that, yeah, these ones kind of apply and make sense. And then we kicked them out to our staff, to the individual departments to say, hey, this relates to the work that you're doing. Does this fit? Is this something that you're comfortable measuring? Well, this won't be an onerous amount of work going forward. And we'll look to you to measure this or provide that data annually for our annual report. You good with that? And so, we went through a fairly rigorous process with all of that. And so, yeah, that was it. And voila, now we have KPAIs is what I mean.
So
At
it
least
begins-
Councillor Lockberg will be giving you, on the assessment, we'll be giving you 5 out of 5 stars at the,
That's what I was shooting for.
Just to add to that, we also, because we went out to the community on Thought Exchange, Thought Exchange has AI behind it as well. So we, did query what our residents said were measures that we should be looking at as well. So we also looked at that as well. So what is the local, what are local community? Because we had a really good response rate to that Thought Exchange, and tried to make sure that it was broad, that we were capturing as many folks as we could on that. So that was another area that we looked at, what measures should we be looking at, and again, use the AI feature in Thought Exchange to do that sort of same process.
So finally, we've discussed the structure of the plan, how we got here, and a little bit about how it will be measured. But how does it fit into the general rhythm and function year to year? And really, it's the document that guides the work of council, but it's supported by 2 other key items. The first one is the budgeting process. As you can certainly appreciate, budget time is when council really provides a lot of direction of what to prioritize, what will be worked on or supported by allocating that funding to do as much. So this critical time allows council to react to the changes that have occurred and address any new or emerging issues that have come up in the last amount of time. All this is done with the support of the strategic plan, and the general question, does this fit into what we had laid out in the strategic plan? Does this fit into what we're trying to do overall? So that's the budgeting. And the other side is the annual report. And really this bookends the year that starts with that budgeting and planning of what is to come by reporting on what was achieved via the KPIs and other methods, and highlighting anything that requires new attention for the coming year. So while the strategic plan is there throughout, you go through the budgeting process. We had our staff come here, present their work plans that project out what we plan to do for the year. At the end of the year, or that gets approved, we perform through the year. At the end of the year, there is the annual report that measures success on the strategic plan, how we've been able to move the chains on that, so to speak. And then that informs that immediately thereafter budgeting process. Councillor Payne.
So I guess that's my question. Will we have the KPIs from this strat plan from the departments prior to next year's budget cycle?
Yes, they're in the draft plan that you have, the KPIs, and those will be the ones, if council adopts it, that we will be measuring off of going forward.
And I think even though we didn't have these specific measures, that's why we, have our departments identify, what was, what were the, I guess, the strategies and activities, actions that they were tasked with to implement in the previous year, kind of of where, what the results of those were, and kind of what's still on the plate and what's to go forward. So what we'll add to that is that measure, not just we did this, what was sort of the outcome of us doing that work? Did it move us towards these larger strategic goals of council? Are they in alignment? Are we moving the needle in the direction? That's the goal of having the strategic plan, having the measures to see if we're heading in that right direction. And I treat those broader strategic goals as sort of the marching orders for all our staff when they're looking at a new opportunity, whatever. Does it fit? Does it, will that move us the furthest versus, doing something else? And if they can look at that, say yes, and we can measure that progress, then we should be moving in the right direction. And we create that flexibility. It's not just a task list, do these 10 task lists with no thinking. Here's, do those tasks align? Does that move that strategy forward? Does that strategy move that strategic goal forward? So that's how we see. And council's role is obviously where are we going, which is those larger strategic goals. And what we're bringing as staff, does that make sense to you? That will move us there. And our accountability is, here's where we thought we would be able to get to, and here's how the progress we're making, and here's the measures that say we're either on track or not on track.
Councilor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. So as both of you are talking, I kind of am seeing this sort of relative day-to-day operations, which have to run smoothly, but then there's also this kind of absolute direction that we're heading in, and this combination of keeping track of the daily, but also, making sure that's moving towards the goals, which is really very challenging, considering then you're also dealing with whatever's coming at you, globally or Canada-wide or locally. So it is a very challenging piece of work, but I do want to say thank you for trying this kind of new. I was looking back at the other strategic plans the last few years, and it's you're really trying to condense an incredible amount of information in a very tight package. So I really want to thank you for that. I'm wondering how. So there's just so many unknowns going into the future economic environment and all that. How do we deal with all that and make sure we're keeping the strategic plan? Because sometimes we have to, like when COVID happened, we just had to go. We had to deal with it. And it wasn't about strategic plan. It was about dealing.
And I think that's kind of the approach. I mean, I think we have to be flexible. That's why we don't, I always think that when you number things or put one in front of the other, that somehow people look at it and they determine that that's the order that's going to be done.
Exactly.
But we always have to have the flexibility. And I would say, just in talking about the bit of presentation that we've had here, just in terms of housing, like when we met, there wasn't 8 new pieces of provincial legislation that tipped housing on its ear that we now have to adapt to, right? And that's not like we can say, well, it wasn't on the strategic plan, so we're not going to do the work.
Yeah.
Because we need to keep the provincial government on side. So, if they're writing new rules, then we have to have the flexibility to be able to adjust our bylaws and such to meet the new rules. So it's always something that's in motion. And I think that it's like Nelson Next. I mean, I think the strategic plan is somewhat aspirational. Wouldn't it be great if every time we had a new strategic plan, we got through everything, in 2.5 years, and then we had to go and sit down and have another strategic plan to get us through the last 1.5 years, but it doesn't work that way. As you can see, there's that carryover because some of these projects do take a long time. And I think one of the things that's always, in my mind, been in Nelson is that we're very nimble to be able to move around. And then, and I'm thankful that in terms of all these housing policies that they have now we will be getting some money to help with staffing, that we can use that money judiciously and decide where it needs to be put within the OCP and the Nelson housing study and all of the other things that are going on, and then whatever bylaws we need to bring back. So I think it's just about being flexible. I thought we pivoted very well in COVID, and I think that we've faced that challenge. So we know that the city of Nelson and its residents and council can do it if needed again.
And I would add, it's actually a good example of, the council, you guys' first term, right? One of the priorities you set was bringing that EM program internal. And that created the ability for us to be flexible, as the mayor spoke to, that we were prepared. So again, this plan, the direction we heard strongly from council is, the future's changing, it's unpredictable. We need to be making sure, how we approach work, how we approach projects, allows us to be flexible and nimble and take advantage of things. So when we're looking at, our planning work, our all that sort of thing, or, how we, upgrade facilities, et cetera. We're looking at, those things, knowing that those buildings need to, be flexible. They may not be what they are today. In 10 years, they may, have to serve a different purpose. They need to, be able to be adaptable to changing weather, all those things. So those are, the policy decisions, the policy approach that we take. So I think it's reflected in here.
So, may I? Just a supplemental. So, flexibility seems to be a key factor these days, and that ability to, have a goal, but sometimes you're going to have to move right instead of left to get there, and having that built in. And I do feel like, it's definitely being attempted here, but it also is really challenging because we're running a city which needs to have every day needs to unfold in a really organized way. So it's definitely a tightrope. So thank you for the work.
And I would just say, from a staff perspective, having a strategic plan and having it out there really allows, because as staff, there's everything that's shifting sort of underneath you, but then there's also, what I always used to refer to as like the shiny objects that can really get you off track, and you chase them. And, without a good strategic plan that staff can follow and keep in the back of their minds and always ask, it's shiny, but does it actually support that? It really is that grounding, has that grounding effect on all of the work that we do. So when something comes along, when something pivots, we say, okay, do we take advantage of this? How's it the strategic plan? And if, to be perfectly honest, if we're really convinced that we should be taking advantage of it and it doesn't necessarily support the strategic plan, that's when we come back to council and have a discussion with you all, right? And that's really, I think, the point of this slide and the picture that I show here. I was trying to think about it because the strategic plan is not a static document. And, I put it in more of the, evolution, metamorphosis, that process where it grows over time and it changes and it'll look. And so to not, understand that we, I think we have some really great strategies laid down here and some good goals that we have that staff can really support and follow, and that at the end of the day, whether it's coming to council meetings, whether it's during that budgeting process, whether it's during that reporting process, the opportunity is there to pivot if need be. So just to keep that in mind. And I thought it was a beautiful illustration.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah, and I think you'll see the tactics are, that's why we didn't want to try to get too specific.
Yes.
Some are a little more specific than others, because they're, the Hall Street Pier is there. It's not like it's going to be something else, but, how we implement Nelson Next, how we implement, the housing needs assessment, all those things, there's going to be a number of recommendations, which ones of those make sense and what order, what funding comes out, what et cetera, is on the plate. So it creates enough flexibility that we don't say we're going to implement, recommendation 1, 3, and
So it's prescriptive, but not locked down. And do you feel like that's a kind of general rule, or not a rule, but it's a general operation tone, I would say, because you're constantly adjusting, right?
I think I would use guiding as opposed to prescriptive. You know, the strategic goals, like that's guiding us. That's guiding decisions that are made around this table. It's guiding decisions that, you know, staff go through to get to this table or bring things. So yeah, I would just note that it's got information in there. It's got some things that are prescriptive, like Kevin said. The pier isn't going anywhere. I don't think we're going to pivot off of that one, you know, and some of the other tasks that we have that are listed in there, or tactics. But at the end of the day, it's a guiding document.
Thank you.
Councillor Payne.
I just wanted to use another analogy, if I may, as much as I love this one, but I've been using it all my life, from Stephen Covey. And it's the pilot takes off from one airport and he's generally knows where he's going to go. We're going to London today, 700 people that are in the plane. It's up to the pilot to adapt to the situations that he comes in. Is it going to be wind speed? Is he going to have to go higher or lower? Is he going to have to move around a storm? So once council has decided, yes, indeed, we are going to London, then it's up to the pilot. That's the pilot's job, to figure out how to get us there. And if something dramatic happens, like COVID, the pilot comes and says, we're going to have to land somewhere else. What do you think? And that's the part that works for me, because, as you say, there may be a shiny object. And it just keeps you on path. It might not be the direct path that we all started out on, thinking it's going to go this way, but that's something that is an easy thing for me to visualize.
Yeah, great. I'll change the slide when we're done.
No need to change
I
the
think
slide.
it's
I just think,
much better than this. Yeah.
no, I think just something that people can relate to.
Yeah.
I think we're really, really clear on what our town is. We want to keep our people safe. We want to attract people. We want to have many opportunities. It's all in there. I think we've agreed on those things. We know what city we're headed to while we're here.
I love your analogy, Councillor Payne, but given all the headlines from about Boeing lately, I don't want to change the slide currently, because I don't want the bolts
blow off.
I don't want the bolts falling off the off the train here. So.
And I guess that's the other part for council, is it's our job to make sure the bolts are staying on. And somewhere along the line, somebody dropped the ball on those ones, as we've seen, and we're hearing the headlines about it. So that's a key part of what our job is, to make sure that staff understands how critically important it is, and the community feels completely comfortable that we are very aware of that and are going to do our best not to let any bolts fly off or any other important parts of the mechanical system.
Councillor Page. Gee.
Can I ask about some of the measurements?
Are you finished, Chris?
Nope, actually.
Oh, go on.
But
Yeah.
Now you,
There, questions.
Yeah.
Now there.
Can I
Okay,
ask about
Councillor
some of the
Page.
measurements?
sure, yeah.
So inside of the number of types of housing starts, how are we going to keep track of the size of the gap between where we want to be and where we are?
I think that's,
Knowing we're going up is different than knowing how much pressure we're taking off.
yeah, I think that's addressed in the housing needs report. It identifies what housing we need in the
Okay.
future, and then the OCP and your zoning bylaw, et cetera, has to be those tools that can get you there. So we know where we need to be. This is kind of annual reporting. We need whatever 500 units in 20 years. Here's how many we're producing each year. And, so I think
Okay,
that's where that'll come.
that's sufficient. Supplemental?
Sure.
On the KPI about thriving economies, we talk about measuring events in city amenities. I was going to suggest that we expand that to city-funded amenities, because I think the economy is not necessarily anchored to just us, but we would want to have a sense of what was going on at the rec center, and perhaps even stuff within parks that we fund that aren't necessarily within Nelson. Having a sense of how busy all of those things are feeds back into that goal. So I thought city funded.
Yep.
So reach into the RBCK a little bit there. That's it.
Councillor Lockwood.
So I guess with the caveat that these analogies that we're raising up are essentially models of how we kind of see a complex world and try to reduce it down to, something that we can think through without blowing our minds with the cognitive overload. And it was somebody said, and I can't figure out who, that modeling is the art of the essential, which I really like because it's trying to reduce this complexity into something that kind of maps onto the complex system that we're trying to model and captures all the essential elements so you can see, are we making progress with these KPIs and do they represent reality out there in the world in a way that's meaningful and effective? And I think in general, we've done a pretty decent job of that with the KPIs and some of the tactics. But I can see how sometimes the models that we choose do tend to obscure as much as they reveal. One of the examples of how that's happened in the past, I think, is in the council reports or agenda items we often have lines saying, that this policy, advances our goals as outlined in Nelson Next, or previously the Path to 2040 and OCP. But often, you'd see that it picks out one item or one element, like sustainable or healthy neighborhoods, as opposed to ideally all of them. Because sometimes you get unintended consequences or you advance one at the cost of the others. And I think that's a challenge that reflects kind of a pretty linear model or a mechanistic model that we're here, we're trying to get there, and we can, advance kind of linearly along that path and without really any other unintended effects that might be happening on the side. So I just want to first raise that as a caution so that when we try to implement this and when we get our KPIs, we actually look at any of these priorities as addressing not just one thing, but all of the things, so that economic development doesn't come at the cost of the environment or vice versa, and so on. And in fact, as a general sort of thing to move forward, maybe starting to adopt a model of an organism or a system in which any one thing we do ideally advances all of them, and trying to look for those opportunities that at least minimize the unintended effects on these other priorities, but sort of moves forward. As an example of that, I can see when we emphasize economic development, that what we do is think about, can we both advance our economy, so we've got a thriving economy, and a rich and diverse ecosystem and a healthy neighborhood? Because you can imagine policies could do all of those things. And some of our priorities are set by how impactful these initiatives are across the whole system. And that would probably change what we end up doing. Like, for example, are we going to invest in more built infrastructure over here when you can see, well, it only advances that one priority and maybe even undermines others. And I know it's a practice that we have to kind of do, but I think the more of us that are trying to adopt that kind of model, the more success we'll have at accomplishing more things at once. So I think we've got some of that in this, and I think I generally think it's great, and I think it's reflective of our strat plan, but again, as beginning that process towards multi-solving, and I think this will come out in the KPIs, and it will come out in the agenda items that come to us and when we say, this advances our strategic plan, we try to see, does it advance the strategic plan item at the cost of anything else? Or does it ideally advance multiple or all of them at the same time?
May I just comment on that?
Councillor Woodward.
I think a perfect example of that is when, let's say down at the big intersection at the bottom of Baker, when the work was being done, we're like, oh, well, while that work is being done, let's get some new pipe and water in there and let's get it, ready for the next project. So I kind of feel like we are, like as a city, we definitely do that multi-level thinking. But I see you're kind of blowing it up to like a larger concept of sort of the big moves and the little moves are all kind of working towards the grander goals.
Yeah.
But I do feel like I've seen it a lot, where we try to take advantage of this is happening, so we better do this while we can, and that's opening up, so let's get in there and fix that. And
Yeah, interesting enough, we're just in the meeting with around Nelson Next and sort of more on approach. How do we, if this is where we're trying to achieve, what's the approach to get there, and having, in the sustainability plan, we deliberately, in each of those goals, saying what are these, what are we achieving in each of these areas, and the approach does the same thing with Nelson Next. It's not just, if we, if we properly fund it, how does that move all these things forward? And Councillor Payne's analogy, I think these broader goals is what London looks like. So if it's not just going to London actually, we want London to look like this. And if that's how we want London to look like, just getting there isn't enough. It's actually, how do we, how do we dress, how do we, whatever, all those things that, achieve that. So definitely I agree. Is there work to do? To get that alignment thinking. Yeah, for sure. We need to, because you're right. We tend to go, it's advancing this thing and don't necessarily, identify, is it taken away somewhere else? Or I think certainly as staff, we're not blind to say if we do this project and, it destroys our lakefront, and, if we put a big soccer dome on the lakefront, that's probably not, advancing some of these other goals. It might advance that recreation goal, but certainly not make our, be environmentally friendly for our waterfront or achieve a bunch of those other goals. So we, certainly that's a lens, but we probably, we're starting to talk about how do we, formalize that. In fact, that's really the exact question or discussion we had when we were talking about Nelson Next. How do we make sure, even in projects, when we're looking at that, is this actually the best project when we look through all those lenses, as opposed, is it the best Nelson Hydro project? Is it the best Public Works project? Is it the best city project to do this, right?
I would just note too on the KPIs, I think this year, we were pretty intentional in how they were developed, in that we wanted to keep them relatively, I don't want to say easy because that doesn't reflect them, but we didn't want to get overly sophisticated with the KPIs with our first sort of swing at them and how we report on them. So that's something that we'll look to perhaps start looking at, maybe some of those interrelated KPIs that are taking into consideration, what would be the outcome of, like, say, I think multi-solving was the term that I heard, right? So, just note that they are a little, like, the KPIs are pretty straightforward, but that was an intentional move, and to not get overly sophisticated such that, again, and that spoke to my slide about that fine line that you have to walk with KPIs, that right off the pop, when we start bringing these in, we don't want to get into super sophisticated KPIs. That's something that we can work toward as we develop our systems. And because you start developing your systems with considering, like, how are we going to measure these, right? And so that's how you end up, okay, well, let's develop it, let's make this small little tweak in the system now, and we'll have a much better measure going forward in the future with very little effort. Whereas if we just go ahead building it like this and then try to bring in that same measure, no, it's exponentially more difficult, to get that measure. So that was just to say that, they're pretty straightforward right now, and that was intentional with the idea that we grow over time. Makes sense. Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Payne.
In as much as the mayor's comment earlier said that numbering them doesn't prioritize one over the other. I feel that people do naturally go there. And the way I see it now is we've sort of put our economic business strength as number one. Would it be difficult to shift to a more resident, community, neighborhood focus as our number one and move business down? Does that, like, I see the government ones as being the support and our natural environment, our residents, and then our economic wealth as being, it is a hierarchy. But I think it's just a small comment. I won't go into wordsmithing, but it's the same as I'd like to see the paradigm shift around active transportation. So we don't talk about roads, sidewalks, and active infrastructure. We talk about pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicular traffic. If we just shift it, we're still saying the same thing, but we're having people start to reframe their experience of how we move through the city. Does it change the work we do?
Yeah, I can speak to changing it around is no problem at all.
Okay.
So that's a very easy thing. And totally get your point about the numbering. The challenge of numbering, like not going with numbering or finding some other thing is.
Yeah, no, it's hard.
Well, and it's just the ease of communications, like even as we worked through this, we would sort of say, hey, what do you think about 2.1? It seems kind of, whereas before it was like, no, like blue. And then, the third bullet, so that's why it's there, but we can absolutely shift it around to council's preference. And to be honest, those are the sort of like big things that we wanted to capture here.
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider that wordsmithing by any means. That's a big structural thing.
And do we want, so should we send out the 5 of them and you guys can rank them and?
Yeah, that's
that's
probably
a
the
good idea.
easiest.
Because we're all going to have different.
Yeah, we're all gonna have
Yeah.
a different view of it. Yeah.
And can I say on that?
If I could just say one more thing, that came really, I wanted to look through this, what we heard from the OCP document. And as I was reading through there, it was very, very clear that the top tier things that our citizens talk to us about is the natural beauty of our community, and the neighborhoods, and what brings people here is the arts and culture. Everybody loves Baker Street, as do we all, and we understand that the economic vibrancy of that is key to our economic health of the community, but it's not the number one thing that people named when we were asking them what was important to them moving forward. So it's definitely key, and Baker Street obviously isn't the only economic contributor, but
Councillor Hockenberg.
I was just going
And
to say
Councillor Page.
on that maybe, because I guess communication and framing is super important. People will read into things that we don't intend. Maybe then as well is to create a graphic that puts them in a circle or something where they each, and then even emphasize the fact that they're not ranked. These are explicitly not ranked, and in fact probably reinforce each other in all sorts of ways. And so encourage people to read it as a whole would be my preference.
Yeah, I would say that. I would comment that the things are very interconnected, and we don't always know people's intentions when they are ranking, and it could be the thing that we should be working more on because we're already good here, or the thing that we need to keep emphasizing because clearly it's been working well. I think we need to be careful about even doing any kind of ranking, but maybe a better option rather than us going through and having a debate about which thing needs to be number one among us, trying to reflect our friends and neighbors, is to just emphasize how these things interact. I think is probably a more prudent choice than actually trying to rank them.
So more circular.
agreed. Well, it was in the
I'm gonna
last
call it an
strategic plan,
organism.
There was a circle.
An ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm gonna make that
exactly.
sound.
Okay. He's next. Councillor Page.
Well, you captured it. That's what we ended up doing at the Regional District of Central Kootenay, was managing assets and operations the kind of center of what we do, and then everything else was in support of that, and I don't want us to go in that particular direction, but I would pull away from the numbers. Let's not do a ranking exercise to reinforce numbers we're already talking about not doing, and if there's any way to start interconnecting them and leaning into that, even just a primer page or something that talks about how they're all one and the same, and the multi-solving is all good with me. But yeah, we can pull some numbers out and use some symbols or some
Well, we can,
letters, some acronyms.
you know, there can be certainly, you know, our internal working document with numbers on it. A public-facing one doesn't necessarily have to have numbers on it.
That's fair.
I think it's
Yep.
easier for us as staff to, you know, to be able to utilize it in council as well, to
Yeah.
be able to refer to it, et cetera. But a public-facing one doesn't necessarily have to have numbers if people think that implies.
Well, we could just-
I think just order is going to do the same thing.
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah.
you even
Yeah.
need a number to, you know, the first thing you read, oh, that must be the most important. So, I don't know. It's
True.
We'll do our best to,
It doesn't make any, that's why I made the comment, was that, you know,
However you slice it.
however you slice it, it's not gonna make, people are always gonna say, oh, look at that, they numbered them, and that's not the way we work. I mean, I think we can't emphasize it enough when we're talking, to the public, is that it's fluid, it truly is fluid. There isn't any particular order, and the order can shift, quite quickly. So I'm sure that, staff will be able to come up with a nice, graphic that takes out those sort of labeling the 5 big strategic goals with any kind of numbering system. But I do have to agree with the city manager that probably having numbers for staff is helpful, so that people aren't lost when they're looking at the documents, when they're trying to do work. So I'm going to leave it in the trusted hands of staff to come up with the look. Councillor Panero.
Yeah, I would just sort of echo what Councillor Payne was saying, just in the sense that the people that read this are residents, for the most part, I imagine. And so, and in my way of thinking, like, it's clearly that everything on this list is interconnected, that's self-evident. However, it's also true that we're incredibly blessed, and that this town has a lot of the things that people are drawn to are just naturally existing, and we don't actually have to do anything. We're blessed by our location and our natural environment and our surroundings. And so I would just urge that, you know, however you want to rank them after that, but anything, you know, we want to talk about livability and community and things that affect our residents first. And I think that if we have a livable, vibrant community here, that attracts residents or attracts visitors by itself. People want to be around that sort of thing. People want to come downtown where everybody's happy and communicating and playing music and doing art and doing all these things that we as a community do. You're going to come from another town and want to be a part of that. It's not something that we don't have to go find those people. They'll come to us as long as we're sort of dealing with our own house. And I think that will resonate with the residents as well, because by and large, people reading these strategic plans and sort of judging us on our ability to set the tone here are people that live here, and I imagine that that's what they would want to hear, is that we're looking out for their interests first, and then everything else being interconnected, the economy and the visitors and the tourism and all of that will sort of take care of itself if we're doing our job.
Councillor Payne.
I'm very interested in, have we had the opportunity to share this document and these strategies with our Indigenous nations that we work with? Have we had that lens on this to make sure that we're being respectful of these lands and moving forward I do see a couple of things in there on Truth and Reconciliation. That commission has been out, those directives and our calls to action have been there for a long time. I think it's really important that we name them and also, you know, have a clearer path. But I do think we need to be in conversation, especially around a document like this, which is our strategic plan of this place for the next 4 years or 3 years. So I'm just wondering if that has taken place, or if there are plans for that to take place, or if anyone else feels that it's a value that we talk to the people on whose lands we're making these plans.
I can say, as staff, you know, other than, you know, when we did the thought exchange, you know, I don't know if we directly asked our First Nation peoples to participate in that, other than just members of the general public, but certainly that hasn't, you know, that wasn't, you know, as staff, we haven't. This is ultimately council's strategic plan, and I think that's probably more of a role of council to, you know, do that work than us as staff. You know, certainly talking about how we implement some of these things, you know, I think that's a great idea to, you know, you saw in here, we, you know, just recognizing that, you know, the Snipes have opened a new office here on the environmental side, so we included that as a tactic in the plan to, you know, to actively make sure that we're connecting and working in conjunction with them, but that's, you know, just reacting to the fact that there was that opportunity, and there's an opportunity with the Snipes, is there an opportunity with some of our other nations, and so not meant specifically for the Snipes, it just happened that happened, and you know, we have some goals around that. So how did we do that? Obviously, we worked with our First Nations partners on the arbor, or the Indigenous gathering place up at the college. They were a key partner, and you know, we let, you know, Selkirk lead that as they built those relationships. So I guess on a practical side, we're looking for opportunities to do that. But as far as the whole plan, I would say that's, you know, I think a great idea. But I think probably, you know, council probably leading that would make sense to me.
I just sort of did a little fast. I think it's mentioned 3 times in here, Indigenous work, right in the strategic plan, right in the measurements. So it is.
I didn't see measurements, I didn't see calls to action named. That's what I'm saying. The TRC came out a long time ago with these calls to action. Where are we? Where are we going?
Well, right, measuring progress. How are we doing in our community as diverse and connected? It's number 4. Truth and Reconciliation initiatives. So it is mentioned right in there.
So again, broadly, you know, as far as the work plan, you know, we, you know, again, at a staff level, we have a, you know, a working group that comes up with, from a staffing point of view, how do we make sure that's happening at this staffing level? How are we educating, creating awareness? How are we implementing the, you know, the calls to action that directly, you know, are directed to local government as opposed to other institutions? So that's, again, we've tried to keep this fairly high level at the strategic plan level. The actual details are really the, you know, the work plans of those departments.
Okay, I just want to make sure we were cognizant of it. I know there's conversation happening around the term master plans. Master plan, you know, that's a colonial construct, so it's something that I think we need to be aware of as a city moving forward. What that conversation, how that conversation is rolling out in the Indigenous communities, and what alternatives we can look at. Just one example. But without that voice, it's hard to identify those things.
Any further questions or comments for Chris or the city manager? Seeing none, I'm going to say thank you to Mr. Johnson for presenting this evening, and this is coming up again under item 13 for council to pass with. Obviously, there'd be some little minor tweaks, but I didn't hear anything that was completely wrong or that we didn't get the right 5 sort of overarching strategic goals within the plan. So it will be coming back to us again after dinner. And we have, it's 5:30, so we have a bit of time for some reports. So I'm just, does the city manager have anything pressing to report this evening?
Not specifically, we certainly have been, obviously, budget is prime and center of the work we've been doing. We have been meeting with a number of folks on housing and housing opportunities in our community, whether that's private developers, whether that's nonprofits, whether that's potential landowner partners. So we've certainly been trying to advance that. Certainly working through some of the project work, whether it's the Civic or the Hall Street Pier or some of those other things that we're trying to either move forward on or wrap up. So that's all for me. Amy?
Just a small finance update. The water sewer bills will be going out. They'll be hitting the mail hopefully Thursday or Friday this week. And just a reminder to anybody listening, you receive a 10% discount on water and sewer fees if paid in full by March 15th. We will also be including a small budget flyer so that we encourage some residents to view the documents and provide some feedback for us as well. Deadline for feedback is going to be February 23rd. So there'll be a nice QR code in your water sewer bill that you can check out the information.
Great. And great initiative coming out of the finance department this year to have that QR code, to have take a little look at that draft. I just want to remind people it's a draft budget at this time. It has not been approved. So, take the opportunity to send some feedback back. That would be excellent.
Chris, do you have anything?
Oh yeah, sorry, Chris.
Yeah, no sweat. There's not too much. I would just note that with the unseasonable weather, our crews have been very active in taking advantage of it to sort of, make lemonade, I suppose. So you'll notice the changes that are happening, whether it's progressing, Salvation Army stairs, I think we're going to make quite a bit of progress on that. I think the bridge, I would have to check, might even be down on Silica Lane and behind the Farmers Market now. We're talking about pouring the abutments for gyro, so they will be ready to go for that bridge nice and early. We've been pulling out, if you see benches missing on Baker Street, it's because we're refurbishing them, so we're pulling them out. We have taking them down to the shop, and getting them heated and sanding them down and refinishing them all. So just a lot of work. You'll even see a street sweeper out. We've been trying to keep up on that. So,
Yeah.
It really comes down to what can we do to get ahead of things. And last year, it was a challenging sort of late spring and so it was difficult. Late spring as far as snow. We had snow for a while, and then spring came, and then when it sprung, it sprung, and everybody wanted to be out on the patios, but it wasn't May 1st yet, and patios, we weren't ready for it down on Baker Street. So things like that we're looking at. How can we facilitate that process? May 1st will still be the sort of the anticipated date when patios will be able to go up, but if we can do work now and accelerate that during the time, then so be it. So just to let council know that our crews are really trying to lean forward and think about the best way to use time to make future months smooth.
Nice.
Thank you, Chris. Councillors, any reports? Any issues that anybody wants to bring up? Councillor Payne.
Just reporting from the Heritage Working Group. So Scott Spencer came from Nelson Hydro to the meeting yesterday, and it was very exciting for me because I love the history of our town. We have 5 Cold War era sirens around town that are came up at Heritage. I've seen them. I didn't know what they were for, and I have seen emails. I think we got an email early in our term about them. But some of the hydro touches those poles, they utilize them, and they do the testing on the poles like they do on the regular poles. These poles are just bigger and taller, and it looks like there may need to be some replacement of those poles at some time in the future. So Scott just came to find out what was the heritage value of those poles. There is a value. It's sort of interesting when you hear the story. I think it's available at the museum, and it does tie into what the procedure was, if there was any sort of the Russians are coming announcement that needed to be made, and everybody head for the Cold War defense bunker that we have at the Nelson Heritage Museum. That was one thing at the Heritage Working Group. I thought was sort of fun, so check it out. Heritage Week is an annual event that takes place during the 3rd full week in February. So this year is February 19th through 25. Take some time. There's lots of maps for doing heritage walks around our town and better understanding. There isn't a specific event, but the Nelson Museum always can direct you to something fun to do during that. We are, if not number 1 in the top 3 highest number of heritage, either buildings or per capita in British Columbia. So rich history here, and I think it's a great opportunity to get out and explore it. Lots of people will be able to send you in the right direction. That was the Heritage Working Group. I think the other key thing that I just wanted, yeah.
May I ask a question?
Of course you may.
Speaking of heritage, and I don't know how you would actually achieve this other than going around in the neighborhood, but I'm wondering, like, a lot of money and time, and people have moved here and fixed up the Victorian houses, especially like in Uphill, and I mean, I've seen a few that are just beautiful, like even the little tiny details have been painted, and I was just wondering if we have an ability to update our heritage registry, or you know, having those houses, because those are really iconic buildings from the very first days of Nelson.
Yeah, and it's one of the things the Heritage Working Group is very cognizant of with the new rulings around density that are coming out from the province. How do we protect those? So there are quite a number of buildings that have statements of significance, and it is something that they do on an ongoing basis when those are reported. So when we did the, I can't remember the building on Vernon Street, I don't know the number, that the 412 that we just did, yeah, that they created a statement of significance for that building. So it needed to be refurbished in a way that honored that statement of significance. And they also came up with a statement of significance for the air raid sirens, or whatever they're officially called. But yeah, I think, I mean, I live in a house that does not have a statement of significance. I still think it's pretty heritage, and certainly want to maintain that. It's more than just old. But yeah, it is something we need to be cognizant of as we go forward. But that group of people, they are on it. Let me tell you, we have some of the highest ranking individuals that do work on a provincial level, working in Nelson on our heritage. So it's really exciting. I feel good about it.
Thank you.
The other 1-2 punch, I guess I could call it, is the fact that, and I'm sure you've all heard that Redone has lost their space as of the end of March. They'll need to be moving, so they are looking for any other suggestions of places where mainly they can meet with their peers as supporting.
Sorry, is that Redone, not the hub? So the hub is going and Redone is going?
Yes.
Hub is the 2-punch.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Or the 1-2, whichever way you want to look at it.
So Redone is looking for their twice monthly They're looking for a space for the twice monthly hour and a half meeting. Like, that's a,
Okay.
something that they would really, really like to have. Like, they probably want to have more than that, but that is something that they're really looking for, is that they meet twice a month, usually for an hour and a half, and they're looking for a space because they also no longer have a space. Yes, different building, but they now no longer have a space as of March 31st as well.
Yeah. They were out at the production of Roof at the Capitol Theatre doing a table at the back of the room, and I think they had a really positive experience of that, interacting with community members. And I hope that encouraged them so that we would see more of that, because we know stigma is one of the biggest issues that we're facing with decriminalization and drug use. Then number 2 is the fact that the hub is closing for a number of different reasons, but I'll just say that this morning, Michelle Oakley of ENCO mentioned that they are funded through Infrastructure Canada. They've lost some funding, and it's just not sustainable in their current location. They too are looking for another location. It will have, I walked into the library last week to pick up a book that I had on hold, spoke to one of the librarians. They are already incredibly concerned about the impact the closing of the hub will have on our community. So any way, anyhow, we can find another place for that multi-agency support of the generally unhoused or searching for housing vulnerable community, the better it will be for all citizens in our town. So those are the main things that I had to talk about tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Tate.
Rec Commission's been rescheduled, so we haven't done our budget meeting yet. It's coming.
Councillor Perron.
Yeah, just something that I had the opportunity to do as just a regular person, but on Saturday there was a event at the United Church called Poems for Palestine, and it was a fundraiser for the American Near East Refugee Aid, which is a nonprofit that works in Palestine, in Lebanon, and in Jordan. And it was organized by Ray Leibich, who's a local poet and writer, and there's lots of local poets and writers there. And they were reading poems from Palestinian authors and then writing a response, a poetic response. And it was just incredibly moving. It was pretty emotional. There was a lot of people there, which was nice to see. But some of the poets that they were reading from, the Palestinian poets that they were reading their poems, at least 2 of them have now been killed in the genocide there. So that was pretty hard to hear. But also for me, it was nice to see such brave people in our community continuing with this seemingly hopeless task, and just doing it with a lot of courage and integrity. Since this council signed a letter asking for a ceasefire in Gaza, I think when we signed that, there had been 6,000 people killed in Gaza, and now it's close to 30,000, with no end in sight. And yeah, I was just humbled to be in the presence of such brave people and who use their creativity and their art to push for something good in the world. It was an interesting point that they made, that I think something like 5% of people actually read poetry, so not very many. And yet poets have some of the highest casualty rates in wars and conflicts, and I think, tragically played out in this conflict as well, seeing as how 2 of the 10 poets that were read at the event are no longer with us. But it just shows that, I think it speaks to the power that art form has, and the threat that it holds for oppressors and people in power. So yeah, just if people wanted to, I know a lot of people feel very hopeless about this particular situation and have a lot of pain about it, but if people want to donate, it's www.anera.org, and it's a reputable and effective nonprofit that works on the ground in Palestine and gets aid to people that need it. So I'm going to say that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So, I have just a couple of things to report. As you know, I've been kind of out of the loop for the last month, but I did, as I sort of gradually returned to work, I did participate in a Chamber of Commerce Zoom meeting. They wanted to get out in front in terms of talking about patios, so there was a number of restaurateurs and other people that on Baker Street that are close to the patios participated in a Zoom call, and we will be hearing from I think in March we will have on the agenda Sebastian will be coming in to talk about some potential changes to our patio bylaw, so they'll be coming forward next month. Taking in consideration some of the things that were heard during that meeting. And yes.
Last time this year, we, as a council, I think we made the decision that we were going to run basically a pilot, for the patio season of 2023.
Yeah, we were kind of extending what we had for COVID.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to hear.
Okay, so data collection and.
We're going to hear back about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that'll be coming to us, like I said, in March, so that if we do make bylaw changes, then, you know, we're not doing that the week after patios are supposed to be set up or whatever. So just to try to, everybody staying ahead of the issue there. And I know that, I mean, your work didn't allow you to participate. It was like 10 in the morning, this teleconference, or else I know you would have been there, Councillor Woodward, as our liaison. And just in terms of, today's fentanyl task force meeting, I was well attended, and which is always good to see. And just to follow up, I got this lovely, nobody will be able to see it, but this lovely poster. Redone is, now that the weather is the way it is, Redone is also looking at taking a lead on some community cleanups. And I did ask them for some dates, and I will reach out and see if they've got anything specific. But on cleaning up improperly disposed of drug-related paraphernalia. So with the weather the way it is now, they have some time to do that. And again, both Tiffany and Holly, who lead that program, have supplied their phone numbers with, to reach out to them to, if you need some help with cleanup. And I did ask them to contact you, Mr. Johnson or Charlie Henderson, if there's a larger cleanup that they were doing where the city of Nelson could be of any value in that process. And they're going to be reaching out to the Chamber of Commerce as well for the business community to get involved. And yes, well, we try to figure out how we find a spot for a hub, and I mean, it's just all, it just seems like such short notice to find out that funding isn't in place for ongoing funding. Is that they did in the meeting state that as much as that the hub on March 31st is going to be gone, the programming will continue. The unfortunate part about the programming is it will not be one-stop shopping for the vulnerable population, and that's always what we hear. That's what we hear from all the levels of government, that we need to have, one place that you can go to that you can get access to, for not only the vulnerable populations, but the whole idea of like seniors. We have a senior coordinating society, so you can go there and you can get all kinds of information about senior things. I mean, we know that going once to where everybody is a lot easier than thinking that you're going to traipse around town trying to get your needs met. So, but the programming will continue, but unfortunately it will not be in one location until these issues, these challenges that they're facing now have some rectification, so. Anyways, not to think that the programming, because that was, somebody asked, I thought it was a great question. Somebody asked that question during the meeting, like, and what about the programming and what about the staff? And people will still be employed. Nobody's gonna be without a job. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. Considering the provincial government's mandate of, trying to deal with the fentanyl crisis and other issues around that, would there not be some kind of direct funding line for places like the Hub? I mean, it seems like they would go hand in hand, but it's, I guess not.
No.
I guess not.
The funding is, as Councillor Payne pointed out, the funding, for the most part, for ENCO, who is the bigger member of this project at the Hub, is actually federal funding. So the question we have to ask is to the federal government. Of note, MP Channing from what I call the Okanagan Strip. I mean, he happens to capture a little bit of Castlegar. One of his executive assistants was on the line today, and did note the issue there in terms of the federal funding. So the question that I have put out actually to Michelle, who's the executive, I don't know what does she have a proper title, Leslie? I don't want to call her the wrong, but she's kind of the
She's just the
coordinator for
yeah.
that ENCO
ENCO
coordinator. I did send her an email almost while the meeting was on to say, like, and has anybody reached out to MP Morrison on this issue, right? And whether or not we can get any traction through the Conservative member of Parliament to inquire as to the funding withdrawal. So anyhow, it's work that continues on. This is the 5th of February. We've got 7 weeks. So fingers crossed. Anyways, any further questions? Seeing none, I think then if nobody else has a report, then if I can ask for a motion to recess. Moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. All those in favor, opposed, and that carries. And so we will be back at 7 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
I'll take it home and burn it. Just take it home.
Or it can go straight in your compost.
Yeah, I keep it as a kindling.
All good to go?
Yeah.
Okay, so welcome back, everybody. That was a nice dinner break that we had here in council chambers. Good conversations. If I could have a motion to reconvene. Councillor Woodward. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Pinero. We just had a discussion about moving and seconding and moving things along.
You're in the middle.
All those
Oh,
in,
Jesse.
all those in, yeah, the Jessies, all those in favor?
Jesse Square.
Opposed, and that carries. Thank you, everybody. Under item 10, we have requests. There's no request this time. We have no delegations tonight. And that moves us right into item number 12, the fees and charges, traffic and parking meter amendment and the bylaw amendment. So the summary is that with increase of paving costs, inflation, technology changes, and the need for more transportation infrastructure, staff are recommending an increase to the hourly meter parking rates from $1.25 per hour to $2 per hour. To maximize the city's current parking assets, encourage parking compliance, and use of commuter parking lots, staff are also recommending an increase to parking fines. The fees and charges amendment, traffic and parking meter fines, bylaw number 3591/2024, and bylaw notice enforcement amendment, traffic fines, bylaw 3592/2024, are now presented for adoption to reflect this increase. So, council, you've had the opportunity to discuss this previously, and the backgrounder is there. And is there a staff member
was going to move.
I think we already moved.
So Amy, you would be the staff if we have any additional questions, okay. So we have two recommendations there in front of us, so we've got Councillor Woodward has moved recommendation number 1. Is there a seconder? And if you wouldn't mind reading it, Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. That the Corporation of the City of Nelson's Fees and Charges Amendment, Traffic and Parking Meter Fees Bylaw number 3591/2024 be finally adopted.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on these changes at this point? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion and opposed? And Councilor Panero, would you like to be recorded?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Okay, and that motion carries. And item number 2,
I'll move.
moved by Councilor Woodward, seconded by Councilor Hockenberg. Councilor Woodward.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson's Bylaw Notice Enforcement Amendment, Traffic Fines Bylaw number 3592/2024 be finally adopted.
Thank you. So that's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or concerns around that? Seeing none, all those in favor of the second recommendation and opposed? Councillor Pinero, would you like to be recorded?
Yes, please.
Okay, and that motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, staff, for doing a comprehensive report on that coming out of the parking strategy. Moving on to item 13. Recommendations from staff. First recommendation, 13A, AKBLG Resolutions. Resolutions for consideration at the 2024 Association of Kootenai Boundary Local Governments Annual General Meeting to be held on April the 19th to the 21st, 2024, must be submitted by February 16th, 2024. On November 21, 2023, Council put forward a number of topics and proposed resolutions for staff to refine. Based on this direction, the proposed resolutions are now presented to Council for approval. So quite a substantive document there with backgrounders attached for the resolutions. Councillor Woodward.
I'll move.
Okay, and a seconder of the okay, Councillor Lockenberg. Now, we can do this, Councillor Woodward, you can read all the recommendations out, and then I might, if there's any one in particular that anybody wanted to pull out or anything, we'll have that discussion as part of the discussion, but just,
It's a block?
I would read them all as a block, and then if we have to take one out, we will.
Okay. That the council endorses the following topics to be submitted as a resolution on behalf of the City of Nelson to the Association of Kootenai and Boundary Local Governments 2024 Annual General Meeting for consideration. Number 1, funding for the Youth Climate Corps. Number 2, funding model for local government emergency management. Number 3, streamlining of grant applications and reporting. Number 4, expanding transit in rural communities. Number 5, reducing regulatory complexities in freshwater sources. Number 6, mandating health authorities to address mental health and addiction problems. Number seven, implementation of advanced metering infrastructure for public utilities. And number 8, providing funding towards zebra and quagga mussel prevention.
Great. So that's been moved and seconded. So council, is there anyone, like, you've all had an opportunity to read the background. Is there anything there that you think we shouldn't be submitting? Or is everybody happy with these 8 that are in front of us? And I guess I have to ask the other all-important question, is there one that we forgot? A little bit late at this time to jig another one in, given that they have to be submitted, but Councillor Tate.
One thing that I would put to the group is if we're going to move these forward, we need to move them forward as a group because we end up having to speak to them in different places. And so if there is a strong aversion to one of these from members of the group, we need to get that out in the air now so that we can debate it appropriately.
Fair enough. Councillor Page, you had your hand up.
I'll let, it's not on the same topic, but I'll just, if everyone seems good with the group. One of the things I would like us to do, just as amended kind of thing, is when we're looking at the the therefores, when we talk about UBCM encouraging, UBCM advocate, UBCM, there's different actions there. I would scrub all of that and just be like, therefore that the province of BC do. Therefore that the province of BC do. Like you don't want to encourage UBCM, you don't want to direct UBCM to encourage the province to start funding Youth Corp. You would like the province to start funding Youth Corp. And the UBCM will take the encourage, advocate, plan component of it. Perfectly fine, but I feel like I would advocate, I'd clean all that up.
Speak to that, Councillor.
Sure.
I'd be happy to do that. I did put the report together and the resolutions as well. I would just note, in doing so, I did look back at the previous UBCM resolution books from previous years and noted that most of their resolutions were framed in that way.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if that was kind of their standard practice, but definitely something we could change.
I think we can just go straight to what we want the province to do.
So, just as a question?
Yeah, no,
So
I mean, isn't UBCM our intermediary? Like in terms of, isn't that why we're members of UBCM, is that they are the intermediary? I mean, I think there's potentially resolutions where we might direct UBCM, although it's a little bit out of their wheelhouse, to actually go to the federal government or go to another agency as the advocate for us to have a discussion. So, like, I mean, I think historically this is the way they've been written. I mean, I'm fine too, to take out a few words is fine. I just don't want it to be lost in terms of, I know that from doing resolutions for a long time at the union, we always talk about who the intermediary is, because sometimes the intermediary is somebody different that's going to go and talk to the government, or.
Then I'm just fine on the level of just harmonizing language.
Yeah. Councillor Woodward.
I would just say that putting the UBCM in there is an element of including the UBCM organization into what we're asking for. And that's they're an important body because they're a conglomeration of all of us. So I kind of feel like just saying like this one here, therefore be it resolved that not having UBCM encourages, therefore be it resolved that the province of British Columbia creates an annual funding model for local governments. So I'm worried a little bit that if we cut out the UBCM piece, that it's a little bit insulting to the organization as a advocating body.
If I may, just to note again that the way these are drafted is such that they go to AKBLG and then AKBLG votes to send them to UBCM and then UBCM endorses them. So it's essentially UBCM as the body that adopts them if they're pushed forward. That's why they're written in that way. So in the same way that if this council passes a resolution, it might say that council encouraged the province to do X, Y, Z. These resolutions are written such that it's that UBCM encourages the province to do that, because they're written such that when they go to UBCM, they're kind of ready to be adopted as written, if that makes any sense. So that's just trying to explain why they're written that way.
And we'll just make sure that we're consistent throughout.
Verbiage.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So any other further discussion on those? I think that those are 8 great topics. There were 2 more that there were actually 2 that I submitted, and the government must have been hearing me, and they have dealt with the 2 issues I had. One was about funding for all of the bylaw changes that would have to come as a result of all of their changes to the Housing Act. And so that was one of the things. And I forget what the other one was, but I thought, obviously, they heard me saying things under my breath. So we have 8 instead of 10 to go forward. So seeing no further, yes, Councillor Loughlin.
Just a comment. I'm really, Gabe, knowing that it was you who did it, I was appreciating the quality of this work here.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's excellent.
Yes.
Thank you.
I should mention
very
that Maddie helped with the
enjoyable.
backgrounders, and also on the Youth Climate Corps one, I should mention the ED as well submitted some information to us.
Well, pass along. Congrats. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I think I I can always recognize a Nelson resolution in the resolution book. The quality of our resolutions is always very strong going forward. And as Councillor Tate has brought up, is that when we get to AKBLG, hopefully that not everybody jumps up and says they want to talk to one and then won't talk to the other ones. I mean, I think the backgrounders there are sufficient, so even if it's not your area of expertise, that you should be able to talk on the floor of AKBLG when these come up. So it's important to keep that in mind, that there is some expectation that we might need to get to the floor to be able to talk to these resolutions. Councillor Tate.
I did have a question about the Youth Climate Corps, because I don't understand it as well, maybe as some others. It does say expand and scale a Youth Climate Corps. Is it the youth? It's already in existence. So are we wanting to expand the existing one, or are we wanting the province to build its own new different one? I was curious. I actually don't know enough about it.
Yeah, I think Councillor Lochinvar, could you address that?
Yeah, I think the Youth Climate Corps would be more appropriate, but a Youth Climate Corps, I think, sort of says that the province could just create its own. Like it's a thing that could exist separate from the organization that exists.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
Which
I
is
think the Youth
part
Climate
of my
Corps
question.
might be more clear.
Yeah, it's part of my question is, are we asking that the province invent a whole new thing? Or are we asking that the province fund this thing so it can be better and bigger?
Or are we asking the province to use it as a model to create their own version?
You know what's really interesting is that when Youth Climate Corps advocate for it, they advocate with a Youth Climate Corps. They even explicitly say, it doesn't have to fund us. We're just saying that we've proven this model. You guys should.
Yeah, the model. So
should
let's stick
scale
with
it.
A then.
So
Great.
a Youth Climate Corps probably is.
Makes sense to me. Thank you.
Okay.
And I just have one more clarification point, Councillor Page. When these resolutions come to AKBLG and your committee goes through them, what happens if you find duplicates or very similar pieces?
So these will get submitted, and there'll be feedback coming back from the committee around things like language and harmonizing verbiage. And when some of these are together, we'll reach out to the member municipalities, and that's where a process might happen where we're like, hey, here's other wording for a resolution. Do you want to sign on to this one? Or do you want to sign on to that one? We did that with libraries because last year we had a lot come from libraries. So we're like, okay, how can we harmonize some of these and surround it under one resolution by many local governments instead? So that's a process that'll happen. That's why we need them in
Early.
early.
Thank you.
Councillor Tate.
I had a question about the muscle one as well, the quagga muscle. This one is really prescriptive with the things that the money should go to, and I was curious if that should just go in the background of what it could possibly fund, or because it gets a bit big for people to read, and that gives a debatable point that people are like, well, yes, this, but not that, so the motion fails. Yeah, I know. I don't know
As I
what
scroll
20,
through
page
it, the
20.
last one, it's like,
Yeah,
what
it's-
page is it on? Sorry.
20.
20. Oh, it is. That.
Yeah, it's pretty massive.
Yeah, because that's part of the resolution, that it's just a lot of yeah buts that could come up. Because we're moving that money and that this is what it is used for. And so in a debate, a person could say, well, I don't agree with number 3, so I'm voting against it. As an example.
So less is more maybe on this one.
Or put that somehow into the background, like this is what prevention measures would look like. And then that, because I think it says prevention measures prior to that, prevention efforts.
Yeah, and I if I may,
Yeah, of course.
I'm assuming they're going to put their best scientists on it and come up with the actual prescriptions. So the be further resolved, yeah, I agree. Seems unnecessary and would fit well in the background, but yeah, I agree. They probably even if it's all right, they would probably be a little resistant to being told how to do their jobs.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at it. If we move that into the background, could the last therefore actually be the resolve? I mean, it almost looks like it's there, because the one where it says, like it does say, therefore be it resolved. Like if we just went with that, so if we took the bottom part off about further resolved, So if we just ended it, therefore be it resolved, the UBCM urges the provincial government to recognize the urgency of addressing the zebra and quagga mussel issue and commit to allocating additional funding for comprehensive prevention efforts, period.
Done.
We're good with that?
Move.
Okay.
I'm sorry for the work that was done.
No, just
This is good
cut.
information that can go in there.
This is good, because now you got your argument about, like, kind of things, like, if anybody was to then say, well, what do you think it should go to? You could say, well, there's a variety of things, and then you would just take those 5 things and say it could be any mixture of this, right? And then you got the answer to your debate.
Good point.
So everybody's good with that, so we'll make that one adjustment, and anything else, council? Councillor Page?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that at the conclusion of passing this, there's a few of these we should forward off to the regional district and ask for co-sponsorship before their board meeting next week. And that would be this granting, and there's a few of them that can just work together anyway, and that's good collaboration, but the zebra mussels is one. And the freshwater source development is another, the rural transit is a third. So just wherever there's not something specific to Nelson, I think we get ahead of the resolutions committee and we just reach out to the RD and say, will you co-sponsor these?
Yeah, so Councillor Page, might I ask that we pass what's in front of us here?
Sure.
And that you put a second recommendation on the table that we will try to seek co-sponsorship with the RDCK, and then name those ones that you want again, and you can just name them by number.
Yeah.
And before we, may I ask?
Yes.
Before we do that, when you have dual sponsorship, does that add power or muddy the waters?
I think the more people that, you know how we, like, I'm sure Councillor Woodward, you see where people have even passed bylaws or resolutions in their council meetings, and they sort of send them out because they know they're going to send them somewhere else, and they're asking for our support. I mean, there's always strength in numbers, and so when you see people grouping together, there is impact from that. It doesn't diminish our requests in any fashion.
Okay.
So, seeing no discussion about the 8 that we have there, and we've made a couple of minor changes. All those in favor and those opposed, and that carries unanimously. Councillor Page, to you.
Yeah, so that we forward resolutions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8 to the Regional District of Central Kootenai Board and invite them to co-sponsor those resolutions.
And in the spirit of getting, do we want to do that in the Kootenays or just the RDCK, or should we ask
Yep.
Castlegar and others, or
Yeah,
just?
why not?
Yeah.
It would be a way of actually building up some good regional connections.
I might simplify, just do the regional, like I kind of, sorry. What?
I think, is the, when we do the RDCK, are we not then, by default,
Including-
including like Castlegar and, like, we don't want to have suddenly all of the AKBLG, we're not going to send it out to the RDEK, and then we've got, like, and then this is the 8 resolutions that come, and they all came from Nelson.
I would hit the RDs.
I think the
would
RD,
invite
and the
RDs
RD, then we're going to have
Ds?
Caslow. You want all of them?
The 3 RDs?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then everyone will see them and have the opportunity, and they'll be primed before they get there.
Okay.
Are we, sorry, if I may, are we asking them to
Co-sponsor.
co-sponsor?
Yeah,
Before it even goes to AKBLG.
but these are great resolutions, and
They are
we'd love to
great
have you on
Okay.
board with them.
Yeah.
Can I, point of clarification, Mayor?
Yes.
What if the RDCK wants to change a resolution we sent?
And they'll send a separate resolution into the
They'll send a
committee, and
separate,
the
yeah.
committee will start to try and see if they can fit them together.
Okay. But we're adding another layer of complexity here.
We're getting ahead of that process.
We're good with that.
Yeah, we're okay.
We can manage.
We're just sending a letter with the info.
It's an invite. It's
Okay,
here.
okay.
So RDCK, RDEK, and the
RDKB.
RDKB.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, so that's been moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. that are going to invite the regional districts within the AKBLG to consider co-sponsoring the resolutions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8 that have been presented this evening from the City of Nelson. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, Council. Very good. And are you okay with that? Perfect. Okay. 13B, Council Strategic Plan 2023-2026. Council completed the Strategic Priorities Workshop in 2023 with the assistance of the consultant. Subsequently, a draft report identifying the priorities of Council for 2023-26 was assembled. Staff have further refined the draft to reflect Council's strategic planning discussions and is formatted in a manner that will help Council and staff to successfully execute Council's vision of the future of the City of Nelson. Council resolution adopting the strategic plan is now requested. So as you know, Council, we had a discussion earlier today regarding the draft plan, and now we are looking forward to adoption. And that's been being moved by Councillor Lockenberg, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Councillors, did there's any further discussion on the plan except for the small, shall I call them tweaks that we requested in terms of making the document public? Councillor Payne.
Is there any reason we can't see those changes and edits first before actually adopting? Since we just had the workshop this afternoon and we had substantive conversation around it.
I don't see an issue. I just want to make sure that when you say substantive discussion, is there anything, we talked about the numbering, and I know that staff would have made notes. Is there anything that was really outstanding? I mean, yes, we can refer.
I would just like to see the document that we're actually going to be using as the backbone of our work for the next 4 years in its final as an iterative document form. Is that an unusual request from previous experience? I'm trying to understand the process, I guess. I'm adopting a draft that we've suggested we're having changes to. It doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, it's been moved in a second. I'm going to have the mover speak.
I hear you. And I would look to, I just simply ask the question, is it substantive enough in that, do I anticipate having challenges with the edits as we've discussed today? And does that prevent me? Like, do I feel like I need to see more? I personally don't, but I understand why you would want to see, for example, the graphic representation of the plans and so forth. But I and this is only me, in my mind, it's pretty clear what we're going to be getting and we're adopting. So I'm easy either way, but I feel confident that we could pass it today and get those edit. And I think we've done similar things in the past. But then again, I don't think it's controversial one way or the other to defer. So I would be fine to vote this down and defer if you felt strongly about it.
Councillor Woodward.
I would just say on my end, what I've seen here and with the tweaks we've talked about, like I trust staff. It feels like it's never gonna be a perfect document, and I feel very confident that it describes what we're doing and what we want to do, and it describes what we discussed in our strategic planning session. So, yeah, that's where I stand.
May I suggest maybe a solution is that council approve the plan subject to the direction that was given at the workshop.
Perfect. That makes sense to me.
That's fine with me.
Okay, so we
call that a friendly amendment? Or?
Yeah, we're adopting the plan.
Yeah, I mean, I assume like that was that even when we started earlier today, is that there could be some little minor edits or corrections, or there's actually a sentence in my preamble that I want to change 4 words around, and I didn't really ask anybody's approval for that. I was just going to do it. But, Yeah, but there's going to be some little changes, I think, but I don't think that they're substantive in nature, but we'll make sure that that's then included. So could you read back what the mover and seconder are still agreeing to make sure that both are still in agreement?
That council approves the City of Nelson strategic plan for 2023 to 2026 as presented by staff, subject to the changes directed by council to staff at the workshop presentation of the plan.
Mover, you're okay? Seconder, you're okay?
Good.
Okay. Anybody else have any concerns? Okay. And then I'll call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? And that carries unanimously. Once again, thank you to council and to staff for all of the work that went into this. This is hard work, but this is the work that's expected. Citizens expect us to be doing, to be giving some direction to what's going on in the city. So, and I look forward to seeing the new graphic layout. And we're on to 13C, the 2023 UBCM why do I have that down there twice?
Two different grants.
Oh, two different grants. Okay, yeah, look at those dates. In 2023, UBCM offered a Community Resilience Investment Program grant opportunity intended to enhance the resilience of local governments and their residents through mitigation and preparedness in the event of a wildfire emergency. This specific grant stream under the CRI program is the Fire Smart Community Funding and Support Program, providing up to $200,000 per year. Staff submitted an application in 2023 to fund the purchase of a mascot costume. So somebody's going to be explaining that to me. As that's one heck of a Halloween decoration. As a council resolution was inadvertently not submitted, staff are now seeking the required resolution. So there's a recommendation there. And is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Payne, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Councillor Payne.
So $9,500.
No, can you read the whereas? Sorry, thank you.
Recommendation that council passes the following resolution. Whereas council supports enhancing the competency and resiliency of Nelson Fire and Rescue Services and the community, therefore be it resolved that the corporation of the City of Nelson be authorized to apply for a $9,500 grant for as part of the application to the 2023 UBCM Community Resiliency Investment Fund, and further that staff be responsible for overall grant management.
Thank you. It's been moved and it's been seconded. Now, quick, the mover gets to speak first.
So number one, I thought we had this costume already because I have a photo of myself with it. Did we borrow someone else's or are we replacing the one we have?
My understanding is that they just needed the resolution. Yeah,
Oh.
so it's been
Yeah.
purchased.
This is just.
This is housekeeping.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And there must be additional funding. That thing can't have cost $9,500.
We can get you that information. I'm
Very interested in that.
And sorry, somebody has to tell me what, I didn't see the picture of you, Councillor Payne, so could somebody tell me what the mascot costume is? I imagine it's a piece
Sparky.
of hazmat
No.
equipment?
No, I think it's a
No, it's a
big fur.
fox. It's a
Ember the Fox.
Ember the
Oh, okay,
Fox.
so it is a mascot, okay.
Yeah, it's a mascot.
replacing Smokey the Bear.
It's like, when you went to the high school basketball games and somebody ran out.
Okay, fair enough.
Is it not?
I think it came with a person. That's why it's 9,500.
Nice.
Okay,
Comes with an operator?
Mayor, I just have a question. I know this is just housekeeping, but I noticed earlier that the climate emergency or the emergency preparedness week is not happening this year. I had assumed that it was going to be a yearly thing, but I guess the federal government's not leading it this year. And And the province, I think, is a little sort of behind the eight ball on this too, somewhat, because maybe they assumed that the federal government was going to renew the program, but they're not. I'm wondering if, I mean, we've got a mascot. Should we, declare an emergency, like a get ready for summer week, and do the things that we've done in the past?
Let me reach out to our EM team and just what their capacity is and kind of if there's anything going on, reach out.
And one of the things I think that here, like in the background, it talks about the fact that Ember, the Fire Smart Fox, is now going to be at open houses and community days and local markets. So I think that, I mean,
Yeah.
the week is still very interesting. We should try to figure out how something suddenly disappeared that's, I think, a very important week for all Canadians to be aware of and participate in. But knowing that we're not going to stop any of our sort of fire smart education and activities on a go forward basis. So
I guess what part is, I'm just on the website for 2024. It's May 5th to May 11th from the province.
For 2024?
Yeah, it looks like it was just updated February 5th.
Yeah.
yesterday. So there you go. They heard, so not only have they heard
They
me
have a
talking in
direct
Victoria,
line.
but they've also heard Councillor Lochinberg
Just for-
talking. He heard,
No,
he heard us talking today.
I reached out to MLA Anderson. This shows how effective our MLA is. I reached out to MLA Anderson last week about this. She immediately reached out to the minister. And they both said, what? And so not taking credit, but I'd potentially pass on the credit to MLA Anderson for
Right. For next.
quick action.
There we
There's a whole
go.
preparedness calendar. Not
Crazy.
just the week.
So I mean, I searched it like 3 times before the meeting started today and I couldn't get anything. So
We both,
there you go. So we were all looking and
yeah, we looked last week and
Yeah.
found a lot of 2023 and nothing 2024.
excellent. So we're good to go there. And Ember, the Fire Smart Fox, will attend whatever we probably do that week.
It's been ongoing for 25 years, apparently.
Yeah, that's what the surprise was.
Yeah.
When we looked to be like, okay, what's happening this year? And we're like, couldn't find anything. And this is the province, though, not the feds. So
Yep, this is the province.
Yeah.
The Fed don't look like they've updated their website.
No, the Feds still, I can't find anything there,
American
so.
one.
Okay, so all those, the motion's been moved and seconded, all those in favor, and that carries. Okay, and then making sure that we've got the paperwork in order for the 2024 grant. UBCM is currently offering a community resilient investment grant opportunity intended to enhance the resilience of local governments and the residents through mitigation and preparedness in the event of a wildfire emergency. This specific grant is the Fire Smart Community Funding and Support, providing up to $200,000 a year. Municipalities are able to apply for 2 years' worth of funding at a time. That's a good start. As part of the UBCM's grant application process, a council resolution is required supporting the community resilience investment grant application and overall grant management. This grant funding covers 100% of eligible activities.
Move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lochinberg. Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. That council passes the following resolution. Whereas council supports enhancing the competency and resiliency of the Nelson Fire and Rescue Service and the community with regard to fire smart programming and wildfire risk reduction, therefore be it resolved that the corporation of the city of Nelson be authorized to apply for $400,000 grant under the 2024 and 2025 UBCM Community Resilience Investment Fund, and further the staff be responsible for overall grant management.
Any discussion, councillors? Councillor Lochinberg.
one of the things that I'm curious, and we don't need an answer today, but I just want to maybe do some investigation, is how our emergency management program is working with all of our regional and community partners in sort of catalyzing collective action on this. Especially, I'm thinking in terms of, smoky summers with the homeless population and just sort of an all of community approach, the seniors and the seniors coordinating societies. Like, are we taking a community capacity building approach more than we have in the past? And maybe we have and are continuing to do so, but I'd just like to hear more about that.
So I can
Councillor Woodward.
So I sit on the Emergency Management Committee. Happens quarterly throughout the year. And I've been very impressed sitting at that table because there is a lot of that kind of interaction. I'm sure we could always do more. I mean, maybe GM could talk more about it. But there's a lot of communication going on between the Nelson and the RD because, it's this particular area we're working on, not going further and further afield. But yeah, I think there's a lot of synergy going on, and then of course we have our emergency manager, and so he's doing that work too. So, but I mean, I don't know if the GM or the CAO have something more to add.
Chris,
Yeah.
if you want to.
I'm happy to provide a bit of insight on that. So there's a couple things. One, from wildfire specifically, there's the Wildfire Risk Reduction Group that meets here, which is a combination of City Nelson, RDCK, BC Parks, BC Wildfire Service that is working actively on wildfire mitigation in the Nelson area, just immediately around here. That is, creating that what we sort of refer to as the catcher's mitt of like reduced fuel area around the community, such that if a fire is moving very actively, like a rolling crown fire, the idea is that you reduce the fuels in front of it, and they're already reduced, so then it sits down into kind of a ground fire and can actually be worked on by crews and planes and things like that. So on the wildfire front, that's a very unique and successful program. In fact, one that the province is now modeling, and I spoke to at UBCM as well. And the success of that. So definitely, like the provincial program was built off the success of that specific group, and so that's really great. As well are the emergency preparedness committee meetings, which Councillor Woodward was referring to, and those are hosted in Nelson for the Nelson area. There's also one that's hosted in Castlegar for Castlegar area. And those two groups talk quite closely, and there you would have all of your sort of responsible, both responding agencies and like not-for-profits, social sector that meet there to have those discussions about, okay, where are we at, what are we looking at, and that's where like our emergency programs would provide a bit of like a situational awareness update on how things are looking. So right now they'd be forecasting on the summer, looking at snowpacks, considering some amount of flooding, but likely they're going to be talking about water, droughts, heat, that type of thing now, smoky skies, and identifying areas where they'll be planning and where that additional planning is required. On top of that, there's quite close connection between ourselves and Castlegar as far as the programs, and if we were to be evacuated, have to evacuate Nelson, it wouldn't make sense that our emergency operations center stays here. We'd then go and work with Castlegar and out of that area. So there's quite a lot of sort of inter-regional cooperation there, and has been for a time. And with every passing event, you see that pick up more and more. So prior to the heat, while it was discussed, it wasn't as big as a discussion point. Now we're seeing it more and more, albeit we don't quite experience the same heat impacts that the heavily urbanized areas do. But yeah, so you see that after the cold weather this year, that'll certainly be, I think, front of mind. So there's a pretty good organization there that meets regularly, that moves. And then I think what's most important as well is just that. And what those EPC meetings really provide, the Emergency Program Committee, Planning Committee meetings really provide, is that opportunity to network, so that when things happen, it's a phone call to someone who you know, as opposed to a phone call to someone who you don't, right? And I think that we saw a lot of the benefits of that even during this cold snap, where some things fell through, but then things quickly built up, right? And the church came online. The EOC did all the kind of logistical planning, or really supported the logistical planning around the scheduling, and we heard from them at the debrief that was a really positive thing, that you have all these volunteers that are saying, yes, I'll help out, and to have like single point of contact to schedule them to be like, yeah, you're in from midnight to 4 a.m., so on and so forth. So I think that just that ability to be resilient in response, which you have to be, there's always curveballs. You have to be able to manage that, and having those networks built is such a critical piece of that resilience, much like neighborhoods, right?
Yeah. Brilliant.
May I add a piece?
Yes, Councilor.
I would just say that in the last 3-4 years, I really feel like what I've witnessed here at the city is an emergency management mindset that I think is being woven kind of into almost all operations. You really can't consider operations of the city without considering the climate. So I feel like that is happening in a way that's very, very positive. It can't be bracketed out. It has to be folded in, and so I do see a lot of that happening at the tables that I sit at. So
I think if I may, Mayor, it's the thing that provoked that question was I was thinking about my daughter at Trafalgar and how they've done I think, and I don't know if this is across SD8 or if it's kind of on a classroom by classroom basis or what, but they've done a pretty good job of taking sort of community issues like wildfire and fire smarting and even water conservation, avalanches and stuff like that, and trying to bring that into the curriculum more. And I was just really impressed and was wondering if that is that something that's happening across the community? Like we're looking at every institution, whether it be the business community, the sports community, the outdoor sports community, and if everybody's sort of on board, like the mountain bikers who are spending so much time in the backcountry during the shoulder seasons in the summer, are they engaged? And it sounds like they are, so thank you.
If I might, just Councillor Payne had her hand up.
I just wanted to comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to write on what Councillor Woodward had said about the city having an emergency
Management mindset.
I'm taking it to the next level where do we feel that the community has an emergency preparedness mindset, and how can we take that one step further? I think I might have already sent this out. I'm not sure who I sent it to, but Powell River has this little community evacuation guide. And when I was reaching out to a number of people around the strategic plan, that was one thing that was mentioned, that, is the city, I know that we're doing some of that stuff and we've done some of the exercises and so on and so forth, but I think that might be information that would be great to share with the community. And I don't know if the routes are established yet, because on the back of this thing there is a little map of how you get out of Powell River when there is some sort of emergency, but something like that to go out to the community might be of value. And again, just that information, even if we don't have it fully fleshed out, gives people that feeling of confidence that we're on it. So
my understanding is, we've done these route planning and exercises, etc. And, there are, depending on the emergency, where the event happened, etc., that at least, certainly when former Chief McCharles was the EM director, he was very reluctant to start to publish information like that, where you start to create a mindset of this is how we would evacuate our community, and then you find out actually the event is on one of our evacuation routes, and we now have told our community, here's what you're going to do, and we're going to have to tell them something differently. So we can bring that up again. I think that's still the mindset is, we do the planning, this can be quite dynamic, and, our job is to work with communities so that they know where to get the information, and they're, listening to us of how you evacuate, and that may change. So, but
yeah, I don't know that we need to publish a route. I think it's pretty clear with the Powell River. It's sort of like Fort Mac, you go that way or that
exactly.
way.
Yeah.
Those are
there's
your
no
choices. We're going to tell you that way or that way. I know we have different options. But just letting people know that, be aware that that information will come on a needs-to-know basis.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's always good to
evacuation
get that
planning
information out
is,
there.
is high on their priorities. We have done some exercising, learning, refining, and I'm not sure quite what the communication strategy is, but I think we have a meeting coming up here really soon, I believe.
Yeah, and the other part of that is just always the vulnerable population. How do we get those unhoused people, the seniors, the singles,
Yeah, and again, I know the approach was a community-wide approach. If, again, Chief McCharles would have said, if you're relying on the city to get you out of here, then then we haven't taken a community-wide approach. So how do those other agencies, how are they prepared to evacuate people that are, IH with seniors and all those, the nonprofits with the folks they support. And our job is to support those where those things fall through the gaps, and as opposed to being that lead. So I remember that message pretty clearly, that we just don't have the resources to be the prime. So again, those that information has to be is all in the planning, all in how we do our work, and we'll look at the communication side of that. I know they have those discussions ongoing with all those key agencies, understanding what the the folks that may be left behind, and how do we manage those folks.
I just wanted to mention to Councillor Lautenberg that at the business, gabbing here, at the chamber board meeting that I sit on, they actually they did hire a person to be a climate advocate, I guess, or helper to businesses to get ready for climate change and the effects, big smoke days and all that. And how do you have a plan? How are you going to survive that? And where are you going to put your money in? So that person came in, and it was the first person to do that. And then they've left now, and they've hired another person to do that. So it's an ongoing funded piece through the chamber for the business community to get ready for basically wildfire.
And I would just highlight that is exactly that all a community approach, right? There's the work that we can do as the emergency program, and I think that was, I can't remember which of the councillors mentioned it, but do we have an emergency management focus within our community? And you see that with every passing event, you see it grow a bit more, and it's how our program can support that, as opposed to trying to do everything. It's shifted, right? From back in the 50s, 60s was stand back, we got this, let the government deal with this, and it's now just widely understood through many, many experiences that it simply doesn't work that way. So you need everybody to be able to respond.
Any further questions? Okay. Fingers crossed that we get the whole $400,000.
Yes.
And it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor and opposed, and that carries. Okay, moving on to item 14A, information items, minutes of communities and committees and commissions. Wow. So the following reports have been received since the last council meeting. There's 4 there, 2 from Finance, Development Services, and Discretionary Fund usage. And I just would like to add my name, as I will be using some discretionary funds next week, as I will also be attending the housing forum that Councillor Payne is going to. I've been asked to do 2 presentations as part of the housing meeting.
Great.
So we can move those as a whole, unless there's strange things there that you need to know about on the list, or Councillor Woodward.
I just wanted to thank the detail here of having the invoice over 25,000. That makes it much clearer when you see the end total, and like you're wondering, well, where does that total come from? So I just wanted I don't know who.
Yeah, that was a request, I believe, from council. I don't know if it was from yourself, but it was a request to sort of change the format there a little bit on the reporting. So
thank you for the finance department.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out, just since we're just gone through budget, some of those costs, like our insurance costs, are almost 300,000 a year for property insurance, and the expenditures, from Nelson Hydro, some of the capital upgrades. You can see we run a substantive organization, and that just gives it some context of, when I think the full budget increase we're asking for is kind of exact, 5%, about 500,000, and we spend 250 a year on insurance alone, and that's just property insurance. We pay another 100 plus on liability insurance. So we have a large operation, and we're trying to manage all those costs and cost pressures within a fairly tight window, and improve services and address old infrastructure, et cetera, so, and new regulations. So I think it just gives a bit of context when you see those numbers.
So if I could have a mover for the staff recommendation, the council receives the reports presented by staff for information. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. All those in favor, and that carries. And then we have an update of the minutes of council commissions, committees, and boards. And so we have the NAEDP, the Public Library Board, the Cultural Committee, Cultural Development Committee, and the Nelson Housing Committee. If somebody would like to move all those together, unless somebody's pulling something out for further discussion.
Move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward, that council receive the committee and commission meeting minutes for information. Seconder, Councillor Tate. All those in favor, and that carries. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of, I think, let me see, no, there's no notices of motion that are brought forward, and late items. And so now we have item 17, a resolution to close the meeting to the public. That is in the opinion of the council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of council and staff and any approved audiences be excluded from this meeting, and that the meeting of council continue under section 92B for matters regarding information received in confidence from the provincial or federal government. So can I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favor, and that carries. So thank you everybody that came and participated tonight. And we'll have a couple minutes here for a little stretch break for people to stand up. And thank you.
It's funny, the Emergency Preparedness Week 2024 still, they literally just changed it yesterday. It still says 2023 everywhere. Oh. The only thing that says 2024 is the title of that first page.
It's a quick change.
A quick change is like, oh
Yeah.
shit. Yeah.
Well, they're a little bit busy, I'd say, in Victoria. Like, you know, there's nothing like a government that sort of has a little implosion before, in the year of an election.
An implosion?
Well, with Selena Robinson
Oh,
and, you know,
yeah.
we've had a few oopses there that have,
So the provincial is going to be this year and the federal
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
year?
yeah.
But neither is announced officially, correct?
No, the
No, the
provincial one is.
provincial they have to have an election by October. They can call it sooner.
Right.
They can drop a writ whenever they want at this point.
I think there's a date for the federal too, isn't there?
They're allowed up to 5
2025
years.
is as long as they can go, so that's
Yeah.
another one that somewhere in there they have to drop
Oh, I see
a
what
writ.
you mean, like it has to happen. not-
Yeah. So that's the election year, so, I mean, there's still contemplation about whether or not we have a provincial election in the spring, but they're getting a little bit short on time, so. I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah, that's Selena Robinson.
I don't know how to do it.
Are we turned off now?
Oops.